Leica IIIC camera, made between about 1940 and 1950. Leica produced about 133,000 of these cameras, so they're quite common in Leica production terms, which actually makes them not particularly valuable. So if you're looking to get yourself a Leica screw camera, this is certainly one that you should be considering. What I'm going to do now is just talk through the features of the camera and just give you an idea what to look out for if you're buying second-hand. Okay, well, as I said, this is the Leica IIIC model. It's a relatively easy model to spot and to identify. It's the first of the screw cameras that has the one-piece top plate. The models prior to this, the Leica 3, 3A, 3B, and the Leica 1s and Leica 2s, the rangefinder was bolted on as an afterthought. So the rangefinder assembly on the top there was a separate section. If the whole top plate is molded as one piece, and if it doesn't have flash synchronization, then you'll have a Leica 3C. After the Leica 3C, they introduced their flash synchronizations. There's the Leica 3F and the Leica 3G. Leica 3F has a flash sync dial around there. Leica 3G has flash settings on the shutter speed dial. You will notice, having said that it does have a flash socket there. You do often see that with the 3Cs and with the earlier Leica cameras. That's a conversion. So at some point since it left the Leica factory, somebody's added the flash synchronization. If we were looking at collectible cameras, that would devalue it. If you're looking at a camera to buy, to use, flash sync sockets make very little difference. This one's actually quite neat. It's just in the back there. Sometimes you'll see a post sticking out the top, which is quite ugly and tends to get caught on clothes. So if you're buying a camera to use, that shouldn't make any difference. If you're a hardcore collector, you wouldn't like that at all, because you want cameras that are generally original. Okay, so let's start with the film. To load the film on these cameras, it goes in through the base plate there. You take the base plate off, just remove like that, and here you will see a little spool. That's the take-up spool. Film cassette goes into there, film leader goes into here, and then you push the two into the bottom of the camera like so. You'll see just there's a little diagram which shows you how Leica recommend that you trim the film. The standard tongue on shop bought film these days is about that long. It needs to be longer to load it easily. So ideally you need to trim as per that little diagram there. You can get a template to help you do it, something called an ablon. A lot of people just do it by eye. It isn't that precise. But if you are trimming the film tongue, just make sure you cut between the sprocket holes. You don't want to cut across the sprocket holes, because that can leave little bits of film that can snag and can break off and end up in the shutter mechanism, which isn't desirable. Some people do just load them with the film leader untrimmed. It's a personal thing. Personally, I think it's a bit easier if you just follow the instructions as per the base plate there. So you push the take-up spool back into there. The film cassette goes into there. Stick the base plate back on. And then if you just wind on a couple of times, that's the wind on crank just there, and just fire. If it's loaded properly, you'll see the film rewinds. There you go, the film rewinds. Crank just there, you'll see that turning as the film advances. The frame counter is there, so once you've loaded the film, you need to reset the frame counter to 0. It doesn't reset automatically. So just set that to 0. Around there. Shutter release button is there. That's the film advance there. Very straightforward. Shutter speed dial. On the 3C, you go from a 25th of a second up to a 1,000th of a second on that dial there. It does have a slow speed dial on the front. So if you want to use the slow speeds are from a 25th or a 30th, depending upon the model, down to a second. You set this to the 25th or the 30th, and then you set this to the desired speed. So upper speeds are set via the traditional shutter speed dial on the top. The slower speeds are set via the slow speed dial there. As I mentioned, to rewind the film, that's the rewind lever that just pulls up and you rewind like that, and to release the sprocket mechanism so you can rewind the film. There's a lever just there that pulls around. So where our most traditional 35mm cameras, you'd have the button on the bottom, that lever there, the AR lever, does the same thing on a Leica screw camera. Just around the rewind post there, you'll see a little lever. That is depth correction for the viewfinder. Now this is a rangefinder camera. So you look through here and there are two eyepieces. One is the viewfinder and one is the rangefinder. So you look through one to actually focus the camera. So it's a rangefinder. You'll see two images like this. Once those two images coincide, the image is in focus. You then move your eye to the second window where you'd actually compose. If you're using wide angle lenses, you're using telephoto lenses, you would generally buy an auxiliary viewfinder to go on the top here. Just looking at the front of the camera, there's the slow speed dial that I mentioned, obviously the lens. Now the Leica IIIC is a screw camera, so it's got a screw fitting lens. The first of the bayonet fitting cameras was the M3, which was about 5 years after this was discontinued. So it's a screw lens. If you look there, the little wheel inside there is the focusing cam. It's that the camera uses to focus. A lens, very, very straightforward. You have an aperture and you have a focusing ring. And on many Leica lenses, you do have a little infinity stop there. So when it gets to infinity, it actually locks onto infinity. So to put the lens back on, it just screws in like that. Very, very straightforward. Just looking at the back, very little there. On the sides, you have the two strap lugs. And on the base, as I mentioned, you have the little key there to open the base, to load the film. And then just there, you have a tripod bush. Now, depending upon the market that the camera was to be sold in, some are 1/4 inch, the traditional 1/4 inch, some are 3/8. So you might sometimes see a larger tripod fitting. You can get little adapters to take it down to the standard 1/4 inch if you want to. Now, if you're buying these secondhand, as I said right at the start, they're common cameras, relatively speaking, so you can pick these up for quite reasonable sums, a lot less than Leica M3s or Leica M4s or even Leica 3Gs. The 3C was a wartime camera, so I don't know if you can see that clearly. If you look at the chrome, you can see the chrome is pitted on the base plate there. That's quite common. With the wartime cameras, the chromium plating, the metals weren't of best quality because of issues with the war. So you do sometimes see that pitting. That's quite normal. So don't let that put you off. If it's slight, no real worries. If you're buying one of these secondhands, check over the cosmetics. I'll put a link up to go through this a bit more thoroughly. Check over the cosmetics, make sure it's clean. Check over the viewfinder. Make sure that everything inside is clear. And if you're looking at the rangefinder spot when you look through, just make sure you can see both rangefinder images nice and clearly. If the mirroring within the rangefinder mechanism begins to deteriorate, the second image becomes a lot less bright. So if you see one image, the main image, and you see the second image but you can hardly see it, if it's very faint, it's probably worth avoiding the camera, because that means that the rangefinder mechanism, the mirroring, is beginning to fail, and that's costs an awful lot of money to get fixed. Check the slow speeds, make sure it's firing on the slow speeds. Run a film through, always run a film through with these things. With the lens, look through the lens, make sure it's clear. You might see a few spots of dust, that's fine. You might see very slight misting. That's actually quite common as well. Look through the lens, you just wind it off, like so. Hold it up to a bright light and just make sure it's clean as you look through. As I said, a bit of misting is okay. The coatings on these things do begin to disintegrate over time. So sometimes you'll see a bit of misting. It won't affect the image unless you're shooting into the sun. It might flare a bit more. It is very common. It's very unusual to find a lens of this age. I mean, the lens is 70 years old. So very unusual to find a screw lens of this age with absolutely spotless glass. Misting As I said, not too much of an issue. A bit of dust, that's actually quite common. Avoid them like the plague if they've got fungus inside. If they've got fungus inside, you'll see lots of little spidery legs. Just avoid the lens, because that'll only get worse, and that will ultimately, without any doubt whatsoever, not only affect the performance of this lens, but the fungal spores, if you store the lens with other equipment, can actually go from item to item. Again, I'll put a link up about fungus and this older equipment. I hope that's useful. If you've got any questions, please stick them in the box below. I'll always respond when I can. Otherwise, please subscribe and like, and I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.